Hi, it's Janet Fitch, and it is noon on Wednesday, which means it is Writing Wednesday, when I answer your writing questions and talk about writing, the writing life, the mysteries of the universe, and all other things moral, mental, physical that go into writing, because writing is everything. And today I've gotten some really good questions from viewers. So thank you for watching, and thank you for your questions. It's always super helpful to answer your questions. Keeps me focused, keeps this focused. So the first question that I got today was about the first-time novelists. There must be first-time novelists out there. And it was, can you speak to mistakes you've seen first-time novelists make? Not just writing mistakes, but also errors you may have made in terms of querying agents or working with a publishing house. Are there any steps along the way, from signing an agent to the day you got the call from Oprah, that you would have done differently? Oh, brother. Or are there any parts of the process that surprised you in a good or less than good way? Well, most of you know that White Oleander was after I had several earlier books, all mistakes in some way. Books that didn't make it as far as an agent, they didn't make it as far as a publisher, they didn't make it as far as a bookshelf, they didn't make it as far as making a dent in anybody's consciousness, they didn't make it as far as being the book that I wanted to write. So all kinds of first novels and their problems. Thank you. Hi, Brenda. Hi, Linda. Hi, Jill. The first novel, the mistakes of the first novel, my first novel. Okay, that's, boy, you want a long answer or short answer? The first mistake was thinking the novel was the important thing rather than the development of the self as a writer. My head was in the wrong place to begin with. Being an artist is about developing the skills, developing the reach, developing the artistic strength, the sense of being an artist, of living in the world as an artist does. I had no models, so I completely did everything backwards. I was writing novels before I knew how to write. And of course, it's much harder to learn how to do carpentry and build a house than it is to learn to do carpentry and build a table. So I suggest working on shorter things before you attempt a novel. Learning the craft. Hi, Alyssa. Learning the craft before you attempt to do something that's going to take 3, 4, 5 years of your life. Date. Use even if you're not fond of the short form, think about hi, Pinar. The difficulty is to restrain yourself from writing a long, windy, windy, badly written thing before you know how to write a sentence and know how, have a sense of your tools. That's why people who go to these MFA programs kind of do have a leg up, because their tools are being examined, not just the story. And first-time mistake that first-time novelists get into is that they mistake the novel for a story. The story is what happens, but the novel is written. There are it is structure, it is what, it's the sentence, it's the scene, it's the, sense perceptions, the ability to handle dialogue, interior, exterior, to know what novels can do, to not just read them, but to analyze them and understand the possibilities of language, the possibilities of structure, just the difference between using a first person and third person point of view, the things that they can do and the things they can't do. Well, if you've experimented with point of view, if you've taken the same writing and changed it to third person, if you've taken a first person account, change it to third person, do it with something that's already been written, somebody else's novel, a good one. Do it with a good, always work with good novels, good material. Take something good that's written in the first person, try it in the third person, and see what you can, what new things you can do in third, and then things that you can't do in third, that don't sound right in third. When you just take something flat out, just change the point of view and see, can you even do that in third? Can you even do that in first? Change it back and forth. Once you've studied like what you can do with the various elements of fiction writing, and you've had some practice and you try it out and you write some short stories, and you see, how if I do something interesting with structure, if I look at a picture of a flooded basement and think, oh, I could use that as a possible novel structure. There's a wonderful writer, Jeff Jackson, who occasionally drops in, who does, has like scores of these on his, I think his Facebook page, maybe it's Instagram, Death of Literature, part of, potential novel structure number 43, and it's somebody's shoe lost in the snow. Once you've played with structure, you have some idea of the possibilities before you sit down to write about, a kid who loses their mother and blah, 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 not to put down anybody who's, had a grievous loss in their life. But, there are novels that just are always told the same way, the same kind of narrative distance, first person, present tense, without examining these things. So there's no sense of, you should at least be a journeyman with your tools before you attempt the novel, because it takes too long. You'll spend years of your life. Do not spend years of your life working with, a hammer and a wrench. If you don't have a full set of tools, learn the craft before you try to build the house. Learn how to do the plumbing, learn how to do the wiring by, making a light switch that works before you try to wire up a house. Make something with plumbing, put a water line into a doghouse before you try to plumb a 3-bedroom house. The novel is so complex and demands so much that if you don't have at least your journeyman skills to start, it's very hard to learn on and produce a complex story at the same time. So I say, start with your craft. And so biggest mistake is going into a novel without the skills. Like me, I had like 3 of them. I know whereof I speak. Other mistakes that first-time novelists make, they open with dialogue. Novels are, I've talked about this before, but novels are sizable, and you've got to indicate the size and shape of your project by the way it opens. So many novels opening like short stories. What I call face in carpet. Everybody says, oh, start right, start in the middle of a scene, you know. Well, that's fine for a story. But for a novel, if we don't know who's speaking, what's going on, I don't want to see dialogue at the beginning. And everything I say, there'll be a counter example. So remember that too. If I say, you know, don't open with dialogue, and then there's some magnificent novel that opens with dialogue, you know, what I'm saying is never, you know, written in stone. It is a general feeling. And on the other hand, if somebody does something, has wonderful control of their materials, of their tools, and decides that they want to do it this way, you know, that go, you know, fantastic. Anything that's fantastic it proves itself. But don't learn writing by writing a novel. Learn writing by learning writing. Doing exercises, writing short stories, playing with things, playing with style, figuring out your voice. You know, get a sense of how to build something before you try to build the big thing. What other mistakes? Now, this was also about businessy things, and as you know, I'm not hot on talking about businessy things. There's a wonderful book by poets and writers, the complete book. I'm going to go get it so I can show it off to you. Do I have one at hand? No. Hold on a second. So this is my office. I'm going to take you over there just so it's not boring. So there's my office. There's my couch where I often sleep, and books and so forth. Here's the book. So I keep all my reference books in a couple of places so I know exactly where to get them. So this is the new Poets and Writers Complete Guide to Being a Writer. Does that show? A little over. There it is. The Complete Guide to Being a Writer, and it has will have all of the good information about agents and so on. Mistakes that I made as a first-time writer. I was a first-time novelist. Well, this obviously doesn't, you know, this with White Oleander, that was a telling my story doesn't always help. People always ask writers, how did you get an agent? How did you do this? And often it's luck. It's serendipity. And that doesn't help anybody because you can't have the same luck of falling, you know, maybe you bash somebody with your shopping cart and it turned out to be a literary agent and they felt so bad, you know, that you broke your eggs or whatever. You know, it's not as helpful. What's helpful is to know the business and to say, you know, this would be the best way. And always being open to luck, of course. The best way to find an agent, the best way. A first-time novelist, mistakes that they will make. I don't know, I was so damn grateful when White Oleander sold. I had an agent who I was afraid to ask before I'd ever published anything, really, who read a bunch of short stories and was willing to represent me when I did have something that he could sell. And I didn't want to. I thought it would be embarrassing to ask who else he represented. That was silly, because he represented some pretty damn good writers. I had no idea until I went to New York and saw the bookcases. You know, it's like, oh my God, you represent Joyce Carol Oates. I didn't know. James Clavell, you know, I'm seeing all these writers. And I just didn't want to offend him, you know, when you're a first time, you know, the first client. Mistakes I made as a first time novelist. The same mistakes you're making. I started writing novels without having the tools. So it took a very long time. I would have been much better off concentrating on exercises and short stories and getting those tools, being better and better. I didn't publish short stories. I couldn't get them published because I didn't know what I was doing wrong. When I finally learned how to write, then I got a couple short stories in, just a few journals before I started writing novel, White Oleander, and really getting my pace, because now I knew what I was doing, and that was a lot of class. It was a teacher-led workshop. So errors that I made, thinking that I needed a big long pitch letter. Nobody needs a big long pitch letter. Don't synopsize your novel, because everything sounds terrible when you synopsize. Even if they ask for synopsis, if a novel is if a story is a cause and effect, setup and payoff, don't bother to do the payoff. Just tell the setup, how it's set up. Guides for helping you hone your tools. Oh yeah, the best books, Art of Fiction by John Gardner, Living by Fiction, and there's another one by Annie Dillard, super good. And then just get books with prompts, like The Writer's Book of Days by Judy Reeves. That is very helpful. But a lot of it is learning to read with a writer's eye, reading challenging material that it's not just like eating a bag of little mini donuts. You're going to eat complex foods that you have to stop and go, how does he do it? How does this work? Read challenging material that can open your eyes to new ways of doing things. Read absolutely exquisite fiction, and then take a look at how it's put together. Don't just consume it and move on. Study it. If you're not in an MFA program, I'm not an MFA. I didn't do that. But, I learned to look at what I'm reading and think, how is the style achieved? I'm going to pull these sentences apart. I'm going to be teaching a workshop, another weekend workshop in January at the Community of Writers on the art of the sentence. And we're just going to look at how different sentences are put together. How is a style created? I had no style. My language had no style. And I had to learn. I was a historian, I was a journalist, and sort of journalist. I did journalism for money. But, my style was pretty unadorned. It was a pretty basic stuff. And I had to learn to make music on the page. I had to learn to do something beautiful. And of course, you overdo it, and then you have to have some taste of what to leave in. How much can you do before the reader doesn't like it anymore? By reading challenging work and understand and really studying it and imitating it, try to write a Tolstoy sentence. Try to write a Tolstoy maybe dialogue scene where you're passing the point of view around. That you learn a lot. You learn from your books. If you're not in a class, if you don't have a teacher, if you don't have in an MFA program. I know a lot of people can't go there. I couldn't go there by the time I figured out there was such a thing. I couldn't go to Iowa. I already had a life, and I had money and that kind of thing. And so, I had to put it together myself. So be smart about it, because I spent a long time learning my art. And if I had been smarter about it, if I had really torn apart what I was reading and analyzed what they are doing, I would have been a lot further along, a lot faster. So, having to write straight if you do, content writing, copywriting, technical writing and stuff, writing fiction is a different deal. And the language is as important as the story is. And so if you have no language, that's a problem. If you don't know how to tell a story, that's a problem. And they're all things that can be learned. And, I have a bunch of these videos on different things that hopefully could put you years ahead of where I was at your point in the deal. I'll guarantee you that. What else things happen? If you are lucky enough to sell and you can write beautiful stuff in a spare approach. Look at Didion. Look at Marguerite Duras. That's very tight writing. She's a screenwriter. Very tight writing, but it's beautiful. Images are beautiful. Senses are beautiful. So by looking at different people's style, as we'll do in that Art of the Sentence class, we'll look at different people's style, and you naturally will gravitate to the people who are similar to what you want to do. But it's interesting to see how different effects are achieved. And a beautiful style, a Hemingway, they say American literature comes from failed poets and failed journalists. So the failed poet is the Faulknerian style, and the failed journalist is the Hemingway style. And they're both pretty damn beautiful. So there is no right or wrong on this thing, but don't be boring. That's what I learned. It has to really matter either way. It's not just it's not as simple as it looks. Minimalism is harder because you have to really have an ear. You have to really have trained that ear. You have to really have a sense of language and its music. What's the difference between a spare, incredible sentence and a spare, really boring sentence? It's a matter, that'll be a matter of word choice, position of the sentence, that kind of thing. Very subtle. Steps along the way. Yeah, I think my basic thing is you'll be given suggestions by agents and by editors. Agents who ask you to rewrite based on their comments. You have to have been in enough workshops to learn how to tell a good suggestion from a bad suggestion. And sometimes the good suggestion doesn't feel all that good. It's like something you were hoping people wouldn't notice, and there it is. They say, oh, you got this problem, with this character or this part. I don't believe this. And it's like, oh, yeah, I was hoping nobody would notice that. Well, there you go. That's a good bit of criticism, But rewriting for agents who haven't signed you yet, that's kind of iffy, because you could work a year, screw up your book, and then come back and they go, I didn't really like it either. They just didn't like it. And, and instead of just saying, I don't see it, you have to learn how to feel when a criticism seems right, rather than being a good student and doing things just because other people think that would be a good idea. You have to set ego aside and go, would that make a better book? Do they see it the way I see it? If you're getting crit that people see your book differently than you see it, that's not crit you should take. But if somebody really gets the book, or gets you and your project and your book and really likes it, and then what makes them stumble, that's really valuable stuff. When you start working with an editor when you've sold the book, editors are usually really good, but they will give you suggestions that don't feel right to you. They will. And as a new writer, it's important to seem cooperative, but that doesn't mean you have to do everything that they're telling you. Do the stuff that you feel fine about doing, and then just don't argue about the other. Just don't do it. It's your book. It'll have your name on it, not theirs. So if they give you some idea that you just don't think is right, just pass over it. You know, if you've done most of the things they've asked you to do, they won't notice the 15% of things that you just won't do. But don't feel you have to argue. You don't have to argue. It's your book. Yeah, Writer's Book of Days, Janet. That was the book I was referring to. That's like one of the things to have on the shelf. Writer's Book of Days, the John Gardner, The Art of Writing, Annie Dillard, Living by Fiction, and what else do I have? I have Free Play by Stephen Nachmanovich. I have The Art Spirit, which is about being an artist, by Robert Henri. And then the Paris Review interviews of writers is always really useful, really interesting. What else do I have over there that I found very helpful? Just a small handful. You know, I don't like writing books, most of them. I think most of them are cheerleader books, which I don't. At a certain level of writing, you don't need cheerleading anymore. You need information. Let's see, what else did I... Oh, what else have I done wrong? Parts of the process. Oh, this from Toby Harper at Red Hen Press. I was having a conversation. They just had their big gala fundraiser virtual. It was pretty fun. Who teaches a publishing course at UCLA Extension. And she said, it's very important to do the online thing, you know, to have your Instagram and your Facebook and blah, 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 blah. You know, have that going. I think for writers who are first time now, you know, gone is the day where you can just leave it up to the publisher, if there ever was such a thing. That if they are going to take on a new author and they have choice between two people and one of them's doing the online thing and one is just writing and they're of the same caliber, of course, they will pick the one who is more outgoing, you know. Yeah, that kind of sucks. But what else had I done differently? Everything. I'd have learned to write like a lot earlier and stop worrying about getting published so desperately and pay attention to my writing and challenge my writing. I wish I'd gotten that memo earlier. So that's mistakes first-time writers make. If you are at a writing conference and there are all kinds of people teaching your workshops, like at the Community of Writers, there'll be editors, and there were editors and publishers and agents and other writers, and everybody always was really crazy about the big writers, you know. But editors know more about writing sometimes. I mean, writers obviously know about their writing, but if you have a chance to work with, you know, somebody from a big house in New York or even a smaller house, don't, you know, listen to that person. Notice who has good critique, you know, notice in your workshops who has, if you have a writers group, you know, hopefully they should all be people that you respect. Any other questions about these? I'm trying to think of anything about writing mistakes and querying agents. Oh, the agent thing. people submit one query or two queries, and then they'll wait 8 months to hear from that agent. No, 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 no. This is a numbers game. So you query 10 at a time, have 50 lined up, figure out your top tier, your second tier, your third tier, and then send them all out. So, and then they'll all start coming back. And when they've mostly come back, then send out the next tier. You know, don't sit and lick your wounds when you get rejections. You know, it's a numbers game, and they do say that women, you know, of which probably at least a lot of you guys seem to be, tend to lick their wounds too long after rejection, rather than just like, next. Yeah, don't wait 6 months. You know, send out a bunch of queries for agents after having researched them and figuring out your top tier, second tier, etc. Send out that first 10, you know, and then wait for them to come back. And if somebody in that group wants to, you know, they're like really hot on you and are trying to sell you, you can hold them off by saying, I have other queries out right now, and I'd like to wait until they all come in. So it gives you a little bit of distance. Whereas if they're the only ones you sent to, then that makes it very difficult to send out more while they're processing. Treat editors with respect and appreciation. Absolutely. All right. That's right. Keep working. Then there's another question I have here about Kimberly, if you're here today. I've been working on her. She's been working on her novel, took a break, came back to it, has an agent, sent it back, has a ton of great advice. Rereading the manuscript, that was it. That she's got a lot of references to hair. Okay, hair as means of description. A way of telling characters apart. You know, one has curly hair, one has straight hair, one has red hair, whatever. I also use it like as a gesture. So a character fighting with her husband puts her hair in a bun, you know, because it's like battening down the hatches. Another character cuts her hair as a symbol of emotional change. Yeah, I remember that. Breaking up with somebody and cutting my hair all off. It's like, screw them. I'm on the warpath, you know. A few more examples. As a writer, it's making me wonder, is there something else in that? Okay. All of that is really good. But remember, hair doesn't tell you much about the person unless you make it tell about the person. So if the person's, you know, a surfer and the hair has been fried in the sun, they got that bushy blonde hairdo, you know, just because they've been in the salt so much, that's a character trait, right? Curly, wild curly, you know. My character right now has a wild curly hair. Her mother just is on her to, you know, batten it down, and she's like 57 years old. She ain't gonna do it, and you know, it's like that boat has sailed. You know, so it gives a sense of who the person is. But you have to, one of the worst gestures, we've talked about what is a cliche. And a cliche is anything you've ever heard or read before, ever, and is banned forever. And anybody who flips their hair in a story already that is a banned gesture. We have seen that way too much. Anybody who does stuff, there are other kinds of gestures. Eye rolling and hair flipping are the two worst gestures, the most commonly abused gestures. And you need to have a notebook. We've talked about the writer's notebook, where you do observations and then you put it in a ring binder so you can use it always. It's very important to have a gesture. Let's see if I can read you my gestures. Gestures. You know, you should like watch movies, or if you're in meetings, not so much when we're little squares on Zoom, but in regular life, you should be able to do a fair amount of observation. It's like being in lots of meetings at your job, if you have a job, or if you're in school. You see a lot of gestures, but you don't record them. It's really important to record them. And watching films and seeing gestures, it's so valuable. Let's see if I have gestures. I have, yeah, this is portraits. So gestures, there's a whole subsection of this notebook that's just observed gestures. And you can use them, it's hand gestures, you know, not flipping hairs, but look at those hands. What can you say about hands? What have you observed about hands? Rings too big, you know, recent weight loss, rings too small, gain weight, you know, people with the big 3-inch nails, the height of elegance, even if you're working as a cashier or driving a bus, you know, you have those nails. That tells you something. The feel of somebody's hand when you shake it. A gray mole on the back of the hand, you'll remember that more than you'll remember somebody tossing their hair. Gestures, drawing with finger in the carpet. These are my observations. On bedspread, on leg, you know, in spilled water on the tablecloth. These are gestures you can use in a scene. Somebody is making a confession and drawing a, you know, a butterfly or some, you know, a spiral in the spilled water on the tabletop. Fingers in carpet on the, you know, often people will stroke something when they really want to stroke the person they're talking to. They'll draw in the water instead of drawing on their face, which is what they really would like to do. You know, those can be very sensual moments, good in a sex scene. The people who don't look at you directly, you know, they're always looking this way. You know, it doesn't mean they're shifty, but it's definitely a characteristic. Somebody who outlines somebody's facial features with a finger, they can do it on the person or they can do it in the air as if they're touching them. Feeling a piece of cloth for quality, that's a nice gesture. Throwing of the hand, like on nets, you know. The air wipe, you know, forget it, like trying to erase the other person with an eraser, right? The chop, you know, that's enough. You know, you're having an argument with somebody and they're just beyond the beyond. It's like, okay, that's enough. The air like swatting a fly, you know, shooing away an idea when you're very agitated, like somebody's trying to talk sense into you and you're like, you know, I don't want to hear about it. Closing the eyes when distraught, covering the face with hands, leaning over the face with hands. You can really watch a movie and just get gesture after gesture after gesture for your notebook. People who argue toe to toe, you know, when they come right up in your face, you know, there's a gesture. Kneeling with head bowed, head to the wall, I give up. I have so many. That women scream in panic, men in pain. That's interesting. Underreacting, overreacting. There's a wonderful book called Man Watching by Desmond Morris, who was a anthropologist, I believe. Man Watching, which is wonderful on gestures, and will look at these anthropologically interesting gestures. Like they have one that's called body crossing, which is when the person feels vulnerable, they'll reach across the body, so you see like their pictures. So Princess Grace checking her checking her purse across, but what she's really doing is she's nervous and she's crossing the body. A man might check their cufflinks or their watch or something, but it's a body cross. That is a wonderful book to have as a reference book in your library. The nose touch, momentary stress when one's words don't match one's thoughts. There'll be a nose twitch, nose touch. People stroke the self when they are seducing somebody else. You know, you'll see a girl going like this, whereas really what she wants is you to do that. You know, the hand like a baton, the baton. You know. Beat to emphasize, you know, and some people emphasize every word. There's your math teacher. You know, like they have a ruler, they like to smack you with it. So it's really great to have a bunch of gestures that you can use in your writing. So I suggested voices, but also hand gestures. And so they can do something besides toss their hair or run their hands through their hair. You know, there's a lot of hair stuff, and it's, you know, some of it's okay, but when you noticed it, then you know that that's too much. So there's your math teacher, yeah, Miss Loftus. Yeah, Fitch, you woman, if you can't cut the mustard, get out of my class. Yeah. I'll get out of her class. Then they won't let you. What else is there anything else that you would like to know today? All right. Well, stay tuned for the Art of the Sentence class. That'll be in January, probably the weekend of the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. And taking a look at how people build style, and, you know, how these, but in your reading, definitely read books that challenge you. Don't read books that you can read unconsciously. Read books that are worth reading consciously and really thinking about how they put themselves together. What am I actually seeing in this paragraph? You know, what is happening here on the page? How are these sentences constructed? How do they build? How does this scene build? What kind of language are they using? What's the first person, third person? Try to move that around. Interiority, the senses, all these things. Okay, Alicia, what about going through old journals and editing things you might have written about your past? Be my guest. I wouldn't do that for, you know, in a heart, but yet it'll be Art of the Sentence through the community of writers, and it'll be up probably in the next week or so. Going through old journals, I do, but there's a lot of anxiety for me in even reading old journals, because I know how things turned out. It's like, I would never edit things I might have written about my past. I would never edit old journals. I have trouble even reading them. But there's certain things I want to remember how that felt and go back and find that and read that again. But generally, I wouldn't edit it in any way. I mean, Anais Nin edited her journals completely, and she edited people out. She edited thoughts that she didn't necessarily want people to know, which is why there's a real difference between the edited journals and the unexpurgated journals that are coming out, have been coming out since Henry and June. I like both of them because one is created and the other is, I mean, usually I don't want to know what's behind a story, but in her case, it's a whole separate thing. It's a whole different creature. Um, let's see. I have it too. The anxiety about the memoir. Is that what you're saying? Funeral scenes. I stumbled on the old notes and that was problematic. Yeah. Figure, for the most part, the stuff that you remember when you're writing has been digested in a certain way by your consciousness and is meaningful in a way that maybe the actual journal entry will not, doesn't have that same quality because you've had time to digest it. It's still the raw material and it's very raw and sometimes pays attention to the wrong thing. I find generally there's a lot of paying attention to the wrong thing. Jill says, how soon is too soon for the two main characters to become intimate? You mean sexually intimate or just intimate as far as sharing intimate stories and stuff? I think that you can share the most intimate stories with an absolute stranger, like on a plane, when you know you'll never see them again. And sometimes you'll be more intimate, more revealing with that person. How intimate your two characters are sexually will depend on who they are and what kind of chemistry it is and where they are in their lives. Some people hook up at a bar or at a party and it just is a flash, and sometimes people are just inebriated and one thing leads to another that they weren't expecting, neither one of them was expecting. That happens. And sometimes people have a thing for somebody that they work with or somebody in a category that they would prefer not to start anything with, and that it just goes on without any kind of intimacy. But there's the attraction can be incredibly strong, and then of course when that wall does come down, it comes down pretty hard. I don't write memoir, Alicia. I have a thing about memoir, and this is it. We live in a time of memoir. Everybody's writing a memoir. Everybody, all the writers you love, they're starting to come out with their memoirs. I'm not a fan. I don't like memoir, especially writers' memoirs. I feel like they're. I don't want to know the matrix out of which those stories arise. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the stories themselves. So I often read people's memoirs and go, well, that would have been a good novel. I feel like they use up their material in a memoir, or reveal the sources of things you've read in fiction. And it's like, I didn't need to know that. I don't know. So I'm an outlier, though. This is definitely the time for memoir. People love it. I don't want to read it. I was just talking to my husband about memoir recently, like this morning. And there are just a few memoirs that really stick in my mind as not to be missed. Patti Smith, Just Kids, not to be missed. Life by Keith Richards, not to be missed. Heartberries by Therese Malho, not to be missed. But most of them, I'd much rather read their work. So anyway, thank you very much for Writing Wednesday and coming to to share your questions. And if you have more questions, put them in the comments, and I'll do them next time. And keep an eye out for Art of the Sentence, communityofwriters.org, and have a good week writing.